The Black Powder Plot by David Slagle. He arrived at the camp only moments before the strategy council was to begin, flanked by a small honor guard, each hand-picked from the Trifarian Legion. They remained at the entrance as I watched him approach. Some men cast a shadow greater than themselves, but few could bring a darkness such as this. One that circled above us and hungrily caught, in a way that ravens that seemed to follow him around the camp were a grim reminder of every warrior's fate, their tattered clothes in their beaks a match for the state of our own banners. Yet, as he strode into the remains of the war tent, I realized I had not prepared myself for how truly mortal he looked. There was grey in his hair, framed by a crimson sky choking on ash. His battle-worn armor gave way to a functional coat, and he kept his arms tightly within its fold, as I imagine one of his lineage might. I smiled, for he was still, at his heart, a gentleman. He wore no signs of rank beyond the telltale scars of a soldier who had seen his share of bloodshed. There were many gathered now for the council who demanded more fear and respect, swaying their war hosts with powerful displays of strength. Each of them seemed more than capable of breaking the man before us, but somehow this was the man who led us all, the Grand General of Noxus. Looking at him, I could feel there was something I could not place, no matter how closely I looked. Something truly unknowable, perhaps? Perhaps it was because there was something unknowable about this man that so many flocked to his side. Whatever the draw, Jericho Swain stood before us now, and it was far too late for me to turn back. 5 war hosts had marched onto the rock-worn plain, but it had been only a matter of weeks before the locals had shattered our positions. They blasted through our hastily constructed berms with explosive powder, mined from the hills that seemed even more barren than those of home. Disasters had built upon disasters until Swain himself had no choice but to intervene. I made sure of that. For months I had prepared. I had sent war masons deep into the mines. I had mapped every detail, every conceivable twist of the land, and the fates upon which Noxus now balanced, the whispers that gave each moment shape. My ear itched at the memory of the pale woman's words, of the moment she first commanded me and gave voice to our plot. Everything was in place. I had accounted for it all. Here, where the earth opened into a maze of canyons impossible to escape, I and I alone would determine the future of the Empire. After all, was that not what Swain had called upon his council to do? My trusted generals, Swain said finally. The power in his voice rang out like the drawing of a blade. He paused, as if giving us a moment to test ourselves against its keen edge. Tell me how Noxus may prevail. There are 12 warbarks here in the hills. Leto began pointing to a spot on the map, already won right by his attention. Each drawn by a basilisk. Send them before the warbands, and we'll be marching over the enemy dead. Those beasts would rot with a hedge of rusty spears if we let them. He smiled, pleased at his own cunning, but Swain was more concerned with the wine being poured into his glass. Will it be poison? His eyes seemed to ask, as he peered around the table. I stared at my reflection in his armor. I would betray nothing of my intent. We can scarcely control the basilisks ourselves, Swain finally murmured, carefully regarding the fine Ionian vintage. Imagine even a single explosive dropped by a sapper within earshot of the beasts. And then tell me in your imagination who wants first, the basilisks with their tail between their legs, or your vaunted war host. We scorched the earth then, Mela petitioned before Leto could respond, the words flying wildly from her mouth. Set fire to the pitch they've laid to burn on our advance. Drive them out of those damn mines. Swain sighed. We came here for the very earth you would burn, though I suppose it's too much to expect you to know the use of saltpeter. He swirled the wine in his glass, betraying a hint of disappointment. All you have done so far is bury your own men with it. The red blades are still sharp. Jonnet spat impatiently from the shadows where he lurked, the darkness seeing almost bright against his streaming skin. We'll enter the mines after dusk, take out their leaders, clean or messy, doesn't matter. An admirable strategy, Swain laughed. But those leaders are not soldiers, not yet. Our enemy here merely follows whoever bellows the loudest. Kill one and there will be 3 bellowing by morning. I laughed, nodding to the frowning leader of the Red Blades. For a moment I was afraid you'd find a way for us to actually win, Jonnet. Silence fell around the table. The candles were burning low beside the maps. This was my moment. The pale woman would be pleased. I would say her name as I sent our Grand General to oblivion. The truth is, you cannot win this battle, I continued. No one can fight death, not even the ruler of Noxus. Darkwill showed us that. Swain and the others watched as I carefully drew the flint striker for my tunic. The fuse line was already in my other hand. Leto, aging hero of the siege of Fenrith, bristled. "Granth, what are you doing?" he growled, glancing down at the crude demolition charge I had carefully positioned under the table, barely an hour before. "You would threaten the Grand General? This is treason." Still, none of them dared to approach me. I held the striker over the fuse, ready. Except someone was laughing. It took me a moment to realize who it was. "And there, General Grant is the only one who has the right of it," Swain chuckled, smoothing the wrinkles from his coat. "He alone understands. The rest of you see a battle and ask what you must do to avoid defeat. But some battles cannot be won. Sometimes the only strategy is to burn, to charge into the flames knowing full well you will die, but that 20,000 march behind you, and that behind them there's a greater power." He let his coat fall open to reveal. "Grant and I," he said with a cruel smile, "we always look for what must be sacrificed in order to win." Mela lunged for my trembling hands. Leto too. But it was Swain's inhuman grip that clamped around my throat, hefting me from the ground, the unlit fuse forgotten. "If only you could tell her yourself how you failed," the Grand General whispered, his voice rumbling with the wrath of eons. "If only she, too, could heed the wisdom of the dead." I tried to scream then, to confess it all, to somehow beg for forgiveness. But there's nothing now, save for the soft murmur of whispers. I spill my secrets, this tale, into your ears, fading like the rustling of wings as the raven cries its carrion call.